Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Can we do a roll call? Maring.
Here.
Dashlet.
Here.
Boer.
Here.
Wayne Schmidt.
Here.
Swedberg. Here. Meverden.
Here.
Ortlieb.
Here.
And Kevin Schmidt will not be in attendance tonight.
Okay, this meeting is in compliance with the open meeting law. I would like a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Okay, with the
Motion by Midge,
Midge
second
and
by John.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Approval of the minutes to the September 5th meeting as printed. Could I get that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to come forward and say anything?
Yeah, Bruce Spence, 521 Mill Street. I'm sure you're familiar with me. I've been trying to get AA back over to the Hudson Center there. And I know you told me no again. The reason they keep telling me no has been they can't afford to pay somebody overtime for that thing. And quite frankly, that's basically a lie. When Sarah was there, she had no problem. Once Sarah quit, you hired somebody else to take care of it. You're paying him a whole lot more money. He doesn't seem against the idea of opening it up for us. So you must have some other reason you don't want to tell us, and I'd like to know what that other reason is. Thanks.
Okay, is there anyone else that wants to come forward, make any comments? Anyone else want to make some comments? Okay, last chance. Okay, well then we're moving on to consideration of bills and attendance at conferences. Anybody have any questions on the bills that were submitted?
Yes, the Algoma Utilities, what is that special settlement, Bat Holdings?
So we received payment from the county, I believe. So they went in and they paid their taxes. In addition to their taxes, there were the special charges that were added onto their tax bill for the last, I believe, 3 years. So we got paid for that, and along with their payment included a portion to the utilities. So if you don't pay your utilities and it ends up getting added to the tax roll, that's what that payment is for.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the bills?
Casey, we done with marina fuel?
No. No.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, then could I get a motion to approve payment of the bills that were submitted?
So moved.
Is there a second by John? Would you do a roll call on that?
Meverden,
Yes.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Maring,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Ortlieb,
Yes.
Swedberg.
Yes.
Okay, passes. Okay, conference attendance, is there anything that needs to come forward for that?
There's
No?
none at this time, Madam Mayor.
Okay, then committee reports. Does anyone have any questions on any of the committee reports as presented? Any questions on them?
Make a formal motion to accept the meeting minutes as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Casey. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, committee reports are approved. Old business, the ordinance for short-term rental.
Yes, before everybody, they have the ordinance. This would be the adoption, the first reading of the ordinance. With the clarification, obviously, it was never spelled out in here, but this does not account for hotels, motels, and campgrounds like we discussed at finance and personnel. So this would be the adoption of the physical ordinance portion of it. of the first reading of it.
You need a motion to go to the second reading?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to move forward with the second reading.
Second.
Okay. Was there a second?
Yep, Jake.
Okay. Would you do a roll call on that?
Ortlieb,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes,
Four,
Abstain.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Mehring,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Meverden.
Yes.
Okay, and that passes. Okay, next item is the audit presentation.
Yes, I'm gonna turn it over to Brian, is before us. He has a short PowerPoint. Everybody has the long thing that was, or the whole audit report that was emailed to him. But with that being said, Brian, the floor is yours.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'm Brian Grunewald with Clifton Larson Allen. Thank you for having me here this evening. And before I get started, I do want to thank Amber and your team. Obviously, you can see the size of the financial report, that there's a lot of time and effort that goes into that. And I just do want to remind everyone that in this year's audit, in addition to the normal audit procedures, we also dealt with things like your federal single audit for some of the federal funding that you received, as well as some of the debt issuances and debt transactions that you had, and then also the medical center and the transactions there as well. So certainly a lot of time and effort, and we want to thank Amber for her cooperation and assistance throughout that process. And I do think there is a power, yep, there we go. In terms of the audit documents, just as a reminder, we issue a governance communication letter that was provided, and then also the audited financial statements. In terms of the discussion this evening, I just put together a brief PowerPoint that pulls some of the key information from either of those documents. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask. This first slide, just getting into the summary of audit results. Included in your financial statements is our auditor's report on the basic financial statements. That's the first report that's listed there. That is considered to be an unmodified opinion. Essentially means that I believe that your financial statements are complete and accurate and in accordance with our professional standards. And I do want to remind you that is the highest level of assurance that you can receive as part of the audit process, commonly referred to as a clean audit opinion. Well, certainly good news with that. And then in addition to that, we are required to consider the organization's internal control structure. We do not issue an opinion on internal control, but as part of that, we do consider that for planning purposes. There is a report included in your financial statements, and it does have 3 items there that are listed as findings. You can see those presented up on the slide. I just want to start out by saying each of those is a repeat item from prior years, so nothing new with that. The first item, comment number 1 there, preparation of the financial statements, really more of a disclosure to remind you that we as your auditors are the ones who prepare the financial statements. And again, as part of that process, we do work closely with Amber and your team. We certainly share a draft of that document and make sure that she has a chance to review and approve that before we issue a final financial statement. So just wanted to point out that that comment is there. The second item or second topic focuses on adjustments to the city's financial records. Again, as part of the audit process, we do share a lot of financial information as we go through and look at your financial records. If there's adjustments or things that we propose, again, we work through that with Amber. We share detail on that, make sure that there's no questions on those, and again, make sure that we're in agreement with the numbers that are presented within your financial statements. And then the last item there, segregation of duties. Again, really as a reminder, repeat finding, fairly common for an organization of your size. As we do go through the audit process, it's certainly important to think about how things are done, meaning who's involved with the process of paying payroll, for example, who's involved with the process of receiving cash. We refer to that as segregation of duties, and because of the limited number of people that you do have, we do have a comment that's included in the financial statements with regard to segregation of duties. Again, all repeat items there. Does anyone have any questions, or would you like me to speak further about any of those topics? Okay, seeing none, then I'll just move on to the next slide. The purpose of this next slide, I really just wanted to give you an overview of that governance communication letter. That's again the staple document that I have in front of me here. That includes information that we're required to communicate as part of the audit process. The terminology and language that's included in there is very standardized, a lot of accounting language. You can see the slide here with some of the topics that are discussed in that letter. From my perspective, I just want to start out by saying nothing that I would consider to be a red flag, nothing that is unusual, really just, again, standard information that we're required to communicate as part of the audit process. The one thing that I do want to highlight or just mention is, and if this is a new item, under the topic of significant accounting policies, there is some discussion about a new governmental accounting standard. I refer to it as GASB Statement Number 87. It deals with leases and how we account for and how we present financial information related to your lease obligations within your financial statements. There's several references through both of the reports that reference that. It was implemented as required by our professional standards, so all governments that are following government auditing standards are implementing those standards as well. So nothing unusual. Again, you're just following the rules. And really nothing else that I would say is unusual with regards to that. Okay, and then I just wanted to jump into some of the financial information, and this is pretty high level. Again, if you want me to go back into the financial statements and talk about anything in a little bit more specifics, please let me know. This is taking a high level look at your general fund and looking at the amount of general fund reserves that you have left at the end of the year, referred to as your fund balance. So you can see at the end of the last 3 years, the totals that you've had and the different categories that we have those presented in. One of the first things that I like to look at is what's happening from a trend perspective. When you look across the last 3 years, you have had, I'll say, steady increases each of the last couple of years. Back at the end of 2020, you had total general fund balance of $3 million. That increased to approximately 3.1 at the end of 2021. And at the end of 2022, those reserves are up to 3.5 million. So you did have a $400,000 increase from 2021 to 2022. That increase is driven off of your budget to actual results. And it's the numbers that I'm referring to are really a combination of all of your revenues in your general fund in comparison to all of the expenses in your general fund. And the result of that was a $400,000 increase in your reserves. So certainly positive financially and from a budget to actual perspective. I wasn't going to get into the details of the budget to actual. If you do want to take a look at that, it's on page 13 within the audited financial statements. And if you do have questions about any of those categories, Amber could certainly run more detailed reports that would show you the individual accounts and detail of what's included in those, because that page is a little bit more summarized as well. So good news in terms of your overall trend and your overall balance. The categories that are presented at the bottom here are defined by our professional standards. Restricted and committed funds are dollars that have been set aside or earmarked for specific purposes. Restricted means an outside organization or third party is requiring you to use those funds for a specific purpose. Committed means the board has taken action or the council has taken action to set aside or earmark those funds. And there is detail of what's included in those categories on pages 52 and 53 within the audited financial statements. Two highlights that I'd like to point out is when I look at the non-spendable category, those are dollars that you need to earmark and set aside based on accounting definitions. It's good when that balance comes down, and you can see how that's been happening the last couple of years. You went from 835 to 716,000, and then ended 2022 at 317,000. The primary component of what's in that category is as your general fund borrows money to other funds, we account for that, we track it, but because you're relying on that other fund to repay you, we present that and consider that to be non-spendable because that other fund has the cash. So it's good to see that coming down because that means more money has been repaid. And at the end of 2022, it's just the TIF districts that owe you money as they borrowed funds. So that's certainly a positive. When I look at that unassigned category, that's essentially everything that's left. Think of that as dollars that are available for contingency and working capital reserves. And it's certainly positive to see that balance increasing. You can see the trend on how that's gone up, ending 2022 at almost $2.7 million. So certainly positive trend in terms of your overall results there as well. I know that's pretty high level. Does anyone have any questions or want me to talk a little bit more about your general fund and your fund balance? Okay, sounds good. Then I'll keep moving along. This next slide, again, just wanted to give you a snapshot. This is looking at your other governmental funds, so not your utilities. It's looking at your fund balance reserves for those different funds. And again, you can see the balances as of the last few years, just to give you a comparison there. If I start out at the top, what sticks out in your debt service fund is how your balance has gone up. You were at 0 at the end of 2021. At the end of 2022, you do have $714,000. That really relates to the medical center and how the transactions have occurred with that, meaning they had outstanding debt that was shifted back to the city. As part of that, they also had cash that was set aside. That cash is then planning to be used to make future principal and interest payments on that debt. So you do have the reserves to make those future principal and interest payments. If you move into the other categories there, you can see balances for what we refer to as the special revenue funds. Pretty consistent there in terms of your overall balances, other than a slight increase in the rescue fund. And I did purposely put the ARPA fund on there with the dashes, meaning there's zero in terms of your fund balance reserves. I just wanted to point that out or highlight that. From an accounting standpoint, you do have cash. You have $319,000 of cash in that fund. From an accounting standpoint, because there's compliance requirements associated with those dollars, meaning you have to spend them for specific purposes, you have to do the reporting with the treasury. Because of that, we don't recognize that as revenue until you meet those requirements. So the point is you still have the cash, it's just not presented as part of your fund balance and your fund balance reserves. So I wanted to point that out or highlight that. Any questions on that before I keep moving on? Okay. And then the bottom of the slide, just moving on to the capital projects funds. And again, just giving you a snapshot of what the reserve balances are at the end of the year. You know, the capital projects fund, those do tend to fluctuate based on timing of when you issue debt versus timing when projects are completed and when bills are paid. You can see at the end of 2022, you did have 1.7 million in terms of your capital projects fund, and that's all tracked. So for example, if you issue debt and you're required to use that debt on capital projects and you're planning on using it on certain capital projects, that's tracked in terms of how that debt is issued. That unspent debt proceeds is part of what's included in that 1.7 million. And then you also have balances you can see there for your equipment replacement as well as your TIF districts. The numbers in brackets, those are negative numbers, meaning they're deficits. So you can see for with TIF district number 1, the amount of the deficit has been decreasing slowly, a deficit of 209 at the end of 2021 versus a deficit of 125,000 at the end of 2022. Again, there too with TIF number 2, you can see the dashes for the last couple of years with zero balances, no reserves left in that fund. And then TIF district number 3, you can see that negative has increased a little bit, meaning that deficit has increased in TIF district number 3. So again, just wanted to give you a snapshot of the balances at the end of the year. Any thoughts or questions on that slide before I move on? Okay. Then I also just wanted to touch briefly on, we refer to them as your business type activities, and just going to start out looking at your utility commission. So this is the combination of electric and water. And just again, giving you a snapshot of the results for the last few years. If you work down the slide, you can see we're looking at your operating revenues versus operating expenses. I always like to look at your operating income with the utility because you're charging for service, you're incurring expenses to provide that service, and that operating income really gives you a snapshot of what's left. What did it take for you to provide that service? So from a revenue perspective and that operating income perspective, in both of those, you can see slight increases in both your revenues and your operating income. So certainly positive news there. And this is a very summarized presentation, but in addition to that, we also have what we call non-operating items. Think of things like interest expense would be included in there. We also have things that we refer to as capital contributions and then transfers in and transfers out. As a reminder, the transfer out, again, you can see that in brackets, meaning it's dollars going out or an expense. That $309,000, that does include your tax equivalent. Because that utility is regulated, you are required to go through a calculation required by the Public Service Commission, and it's called a tax equivalent, but that money gets sent back to your general fund. So it's a charge to the utilities, a regulated utility, but it is revenue to your general fund. So just a reminder on that. And then that change in net position line, again, is the sum of all of your revenues, all of your expenses, including those capital contributions and transfers out. But there too, you can see the trend of your net position, again, being your reserves. So your reserves have been increasing, each of the last 3 years, and they did increase 594,000 for 2022. So a lot of positive trends there when I think of increases in revenues, increases in operating income, and increases in change in net position.
Is there a reason why you combine the water and electric together?
So they do issue a separate financial statement. In the separate financial statement, we present them as separate columns. But when we issue your financial statements with the city, we've combined them because we just always been doing that. So it's really taking the sum of what's in your utility financial statements and presenting them in one column. So if you'd want to see the detail or breakdown on that, you'd have to go back to the utility financial statements.
Capital contributions is what?
So when you have a utility, there's really a couple things that drive that. If you have a customer that pays for capital infrastructure, or if you have maybe I'll relate to your sanitary sewer district, because I was talking about that in a minute too. You have capital contributions for your sewer district. What happened there is you had expenses that were incurred and paid for with your grant funding, with your community development block grant. So they're tracked and they're claimed against that grant. But then what happens from the utilities perspective, they received the benefit of having the grant pay for those expenses. So because of that in its infrastructure, we still have to account for the assets that were received. So we call it a capital contribution. So that's one example. Another would be is if you had like an electric service or a water service, and for some reason maybe the customer paid for an extension or the customer paid for the infrastructure. When the customer pays for it, we call it a capital contribution because they're paying for it.
I guess my question would be this, is that 33,592, I'm, excuse me, would be for the water facility work on Division Street last year, I would presume, the capital improvements on Division Street.
On Third Street.
Or on Third Street.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, okay, Third Street. And the city pays for that.
No.
The
Well, on the front end, Jake, yes, the city pays for it through our contract with the construction company that was the bid, who was awarded the bid. In turn, we then bill the utilities for the water side of the work.
Okay, all right, that was the step that I was missing, okay.
Yeah,
great,
so
thank
yes,
you.
we do pay for it. In turn, then we send a bill to the utilities for it.
Okay,
And it's very common to occur that way because you have one project where you could be doing water, sewer,
Yeah,
road
yeah,
work.
The same
Okay.
thing, it's a paper ledger. We also bill the sewer department for their portion of the work that is sewer related.
all right, so that's a journal entry process.
It's tracked via accounting
Okay,
records,
all
yeah.
right. All right. That was it.
That's a really good
That
question.
that was a roundabout way of saying proportionately outside of the capital contributions, the payment in lieu of had decreased, but that was because of the journal entry on that 33,952.
Yeah, I'd say the tax equivalent calculation is a formula that we're required to go through with the Public Service Commission. So it's a standard formula. It's based on the amount of infrastructure that you have, but as we depreciate your infrastructure, the value of
Okay,
that comes
all right.
down. So part of it's depreciation, and part of it's your tax rates if your tax rates have changed a
Okay.
little bit. Good questions.
Pete wants it.
If I could just comment
Yeah.
on the pilot, that decreased because the mill rate went down this year.
Oh yeah, well, that's true, yeah,
So that was a decrease in our.
yeah, okay. Thank you, Pete.
Okay, if we can move ahead to the next slide. Okay, and then here we just wanted to take a similar snapshot with regards to sewer. Again, similar format, similar information, looking at revenues, expenses, and net operating income. Again, you can see the fluctuation in your operating income coming in at $277,000. And again, from that, we have the non-operating items, particularly interest expense. And then also, again, the capital contributions. And in this case, you can see how it was zero the last couple years for 20 and 21. And then for 2022, we have 89,000. That I do know is dollars that were paid for by that CDBG grant.
Okay.
And again, there too, you can see the change in your net position. Obviously, part of the increase in 22 is that grant money or that capital contribution coming in. Okay, and then financially, I also wanted to just step back and take a look at your debt. Now, this is only looking at your governmental activities debt, and by that I mean general funds, special revenue funds. It does not include the utilities, for example. And this is, again, just wanted to give you a snapshot of your balances over time, so you can see the overall trends in terms of the overall balances. Back in 2020, the total of all those categories is approximately 6 million. At the end of 2021, it's approximately 5.6, so a slight decrease. And then at the end of 2022, it's approximately 8.6 in terms of the overall dollars. You can see the different categories there. Really, I just tend to focus on the general obligation amounts, GO meaning general obligation. So there's both notes and bonds. If you look at the GO notes category, you can see how that's fluctuated and gone from 3.8 million at the end of 2021 up to 7.1 million because of the debt issuances that occurred during 2022. So just wanted to give you an overall snapshot of your balances. If you are looking at additional information, there's a lot of debt information in your financial statements on pages 41 to 45. And as a reminder, if I look at the sum of what happened during 2022, you did issue approximately $3.8 million in new debt, and you did repay approximately $1.3 million in principal. And then in addition, as part of the medical center transfer or transactions, there was $636,000 of debt that was shifted back to the city as part of that as well. And again, there is resources set aside in your fund balance to help pay for the future principal interest. And then the next slide here, this is only focusing on your general obligation debt. Part of the reason I like to look at this is because there's a statutory debt limit on how much general obligation debt you can have. That's driven based off, you can see that red line, it's driven based on the equalized value of the property within the city. You can see the increase in that red line going from 9.9 million to 10.5 up to 12.5. Again, being driven based on the increase in the equalized value of the city. If we compare that to the amount of outstanding general obligation debt, and again, only looking at that one type of debt, general obligation debt, you can see how your balance in that category has fluctuated. 5.4 million at the end of 2021 to 7.5 million at the end of 2022. The reason I like to look at that is that statutory debt limit is literally the limit on how much general obligation debt you could issue. And I always like to look at the gap between those two lines. So back in 2020, the gap between the red line and the blue line was 4.3 million. I would refer to that as like how much general obligation debt you could have issued at that point in time. At the end of 2022, to give you some perspective, the gap between those two lines is just over 5 million. So that gap is increasing, even though you had that new debt issue that occurred during 2022. So I think that's certainly a positive, and again, being driven off of the combination of increase in equalized value and also the fact that you continue to make repayments.
Would a percentage of that be a better measure?
You certainly could track it that way. I mean, there are communities that look at a percentage of how much debt limit you have available, yes.
Okay.
And then I just wanted to touch briefly on new accounting standards, and we'll continue to share information with regards to new standards and what needs to be done and accomplished for future years. The point that I wanted to make here is that the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB, I talked earlier about statement number 87 being implemented for this year. Here I'm touching on statement number 96. They're actually out to statement number 101. So each one of those standards has some different rules and different requirements. We'll be working with you and your team to make sure that those are properly implemented based on the required implementation dates. And then I also just referenced a new statement on auditing standards that's also effective for 2023. And again, we'll share information, we'll work with your team, and I did put a link to our website if you're interested in looking at any of those new things. And again, just maybe want to step back and kind of reiterate what I started with in terms of your federal awards and federal funding. There is some additional information on your federal and state aids included in here. Because of the amount of federal funding that you received, you had to go through that process of having that, I'm going to refer to as that federal single audit. So you're following federal rules which tell you have to have that work done. That's compliance driven work. So we do testing on that to make sure that you're following the rules. From my perspective, no issues, no concerns. The results of our testing did not identify any issues or findings, so there are no findings related to your federal funding. And I'll say the regulatory reporting that you're required to go through, that federal single audit, and there's also an electronically certified form that you also have to submit to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. That stuff has all been done. So I think that's certainly positive. I want to highlight that as well too, just to give you some peace of mind that that's been done. Okay. And that's all I had. Any thoughts, questions, concerns?
How do we look, you do a lot of cities, how do we
Yeah.
look as a city? Are we doing a good job? Is there something we're missing?
I would say, I mean, nothing that's missing. I think what everybody would say from a board or council perspective is, you know, the budgeting process has gotten tight. Think of what's happened with, I'll say, inflation, capital costs and capital needs on the expense side. On the revenue side, there's really limits in terms of how much you can raise your tax levy. Certainly a lot of challenges in that environment. I think taking advantage of the grant funding that you've been able to do, the Community Development Block Grant, the ARPA funding, those are certainly positive. When I look at the trends, again, if I go back to your fund balance and particularly your debt, you know, I see positive trends there, but I don't think it's easy by any means. So I would say keep focusing on your long-term capital plan and your capital budget, and make sure you have a plan for how you're going to, you know, finance activities and how you're going to pay for those.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you for coming and making a presentation.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, now we need a motion to approve.
Yeah, just a motion to accept
Yeah.
Ryan's report.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, would you do a roll call on that?
Sure, I have a motion by Maring, a second by Dashlet to accept the 2022 audit report. One second. Dashlet,
Yes.
Ortlieb,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Maring,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Meverden.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Then
Thank
we'll
you.
move on to the grant application request from Economic Development Corp.
Yeah, so this was brought up, this is a request, Ben, comes every year from Kewaunee County Economic Development Corporation. It requests that is earmarked in the CDC budget every year. There's a couple of things that are earmarked. Ben was supposed to come to the CDC meeting a week ago.
Yeah.
And had something come up. Me and Casey did talk about it a little bit, but this has come through Kewaunee County, the CDC, up for approval. One of the things I just want to state, and I talked with Casey a little bit about this, that one of their big pushes that they really promote or they're really after is trying to find housing in the county for work-related things. And we have this project going on. I was working with Ben trying to see if we could find some stopgap funding for this project that we have going on down at the RDA block right across from Denny's. And I don't receive anything from him. I don't, you know, we don't get back. He doesn't get back, doesn't follow through. But Ben was going to be here today, and this morning he called. He had something else that came up that he can't be here for it. So, and I don't, Aaron, did he say, or he just said he wasn't going to be here?
He, some family things.
Family things came up. So, with that being said, though, I will turn it over to Casey. I think Casey has some things that he'd probably like that the CDC spoke on.
Yeah, well, in this case, given the budgeted item, it's something that we continually do. Generally, Ben comes and explains what's been going on, but the broad strokes of what they do and continue to do, and he notes it in his letter, is what fostering collaboration between, you know, different governmental entities, right? And so sometimes on the surface you don't see necessarily like particular things, but he helped facilitate through the regional planning some of the Main Street grants, the Bounce Back grants. That was just available state money, but he worked with the Bay Land Regional Planning Bay Lake, pardon me, thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Mary. To you know, basically to enable more people to have access to that and really push on it. Again, I really wish he would have been here to offer more particulars going forward. They have broad trends, but a lot of the specifics, you know, there are not a lot I can point to, at this point. But I see, see it as a budgeted item, and I see it as a continued thing, and I think that there's opportunities, with the conversation to, at this point going forward, but I think that there are other expectations to see how and to garner better communication with him, and to perhaps, enlist better communication for that. Particularly, if their broad agendas are in fact housing, how does it apply then when we do have a specific instance?
Thank you, Case.
Well, I guess I have a question, and it doesn't sound like he's too responsive to our needs when it comes to our housing that we're trying to get accomplished, and it sounds like our administrator has reached out to him several times and he hasn't gotten back to us. And I understand that emergencies always come up, but it sounds like the last 3 meetings that he had planned, he called at the last minute and canceled all 3 of them.
Well, 2 meetings, unless there was a third.
Yeah, this is the third now
That was the
today.
third
that-
one?
Yeah,
Is it?
that he's not able to attend.
I mean, I think that 5,000 could be better used someplace else, actually. And this is supposed to be a cooperative venture between counties, public and private sectors. How much do the other communities support this? How much is the private sector supporting it?
I honestly don't know what the other municipalities put into it.
Yeah, I don't have that information.
Yeah.
either.
I know back when this kind of first started, Kewanee County Economic Development, I think Kewanee, Algoma, and Luxembourg all paid $5,000. I think it was all the same towards it. And Madam Mayor, I don't know if that still is the same now.
I was on the committee way back when it started, and even a lot of the townships had given money besides. And the biggest funder is actually the county.
But doesn't the county question this each year at budget time, and then they cut it back and then take some money from a different area to support this?
Well, right now, some of the money that's coming from Dominion is paying for economic development, because that was the point of the Dominion money, to try to get the economy strong because of their leaving. But the county has not dropped what they were giving them.
But wasn't there a lot of questions by some of the members on the county board whether or not this was worth the funding?
We were having issues before Ben got here. There were some of the prior people doing it, the county was not satisfied with, but I am not hearing any complaints about Ben now that he's in the job. But we did have complaints about the people before Ben.
Is this something we should just table until we actually have Ben at a meeting so we can answer more questions?
I would like Ben to come to a meeting. I think it's lucrative for him to come to a meeting and explain. I think I'd like some answers of, where does this go?
And he does wonderful presentation. He just did the one at the county, and it was very, very good. So if he would just come back and do that same one here of what happened.
So in his presentation that he gave you at the county, did he talk about future, it's always, all I hear is about the development for housing. Did he stress that? Does he have any funding available that?
A lot of the things that he talked about with the county was more of the COVID-related funds came in, that this is how many businesses downtown got the $10,000, and this is a new startup, and this is helping retain employees and stuff like that. So most of the stuff they talked about at that time aren't reoccurring things that are gonna happen next year.
So it was
he should have a
COVID
whole
money.
he should have a whole new story next year.
Well, I think we should hear his story.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is talking about funds, this year's budget is already covered, so he's looking for next year, so there is no hurry to get him his answer today. So if you want to table it and
No,
put it on
this
next
is-
month.
This is this year's.
Yeah,
This is
is
for
allocated
his
from-
2023 funding, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is 2020.
Normally in June, he comes to the city, and we've been kind of bouncing it back and forth here with his schedule that he hasn't been able to come. But yeah, this is for this year's funding.
This is the budgeted amount that we did last year for this year.
Well, I'd actually like to hear what he has to say, and I would move that we table this until we actually hear what he has to say. I'm disinclined to give anybody $5,000 until we understand what the program is, what we're gonna get for that $5,000.
Yeah, there's other ways we can spend 5,000, so.
There are other ways that we can spend $5,000. We don't, yeah, as John indicates.
So let's invite him again to the next meeting and see if he shows up.
Do you want him to come here, or if we can get him to come to a CDC meeting? Do you want him to come here?
I'd rather he comes in front of the whole council.
Okay,
I mean, that's, the council's making the decision on spending the money, not just CDC.
okay. I'm
I
just
think he
asking
needs
the
to talk
question.
to the whole,
And
all
that's
eight
what
of
the
us.
county does too. Instead of doing the individual committee, it comes to the full county board and tells what's happening. Yeah.
Do you need a motion then on
Well,
that
I-
to table
I
it?
don't-
Jake made a motion.
Jake has a motion on the floor to table it.
So we have a motion, a second table. Do you want to do a roll call on
One
this or
second
table?
here, motion by Jake,
Yep,
second by
motion
John.
by Jake,
Okay.
second by John to table this to the next council meeting.
You don't need a roll call,
You
just a
just
majority
all in
vote.
favor, say aye.
Yep.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it is tabled to the next meeting. Okay, the Marina resolution.
Yes, so this was brought up, came up from Public Works to Finance and Personnel. This is the physical resolution that Aaron had put together with a contract from Robert E. Lee to move forward with. This is the work out on the south end of the city limits where the city owns that property, to start to do that work, to figure out how big, how wide, how long, how deep, what kind of cell for the marina dredging spoils. So the resolution, the resolution is before anybody. Does anybody have any questions about it? We'd just be looking for a motion to adopt it.
Motion to accept the resolution?
I move that.
I'll second it.
Okay, and would you do a roll call on that, Aaron?
I have a motion by Mehring, a second by Wayne Schmidt to authorize a contract with Robert E. Lee and Associates for topography services for parcel 31-201-34.07 as it relates to an area being used for marina dredging spoils. Swedberg,
Yes.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Mehring,
Yes.
Everden,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Ortlieb.
Yes.
Resolution carries. Okay, then we're on to the Public Works with the garbage recycling.
Yes, this as well came up through Public Works to Finance and Personnel, and now looking for a final adoption for the resolution for
You're just getting a motion.
motion to go with Going Garbage. At that point, Going Garbage then will put together a formal 5-year contract with the city of Algoma, and we will adopt the contract. So with Going Garbage, and they have two representatives here. Does anybody have any questions? I know some Public Works stuff. Myself and Andrew are still working on a list. This is gonna go back on the Public Works agenda to discuss on residential and some businesses and how many bins we physically have. That's one thing that we'll be working with Andrew and Going Garbage with, to still get that worked out before December 31st, and how that whole switchover will take place. Myself and Aaron have been talking about transferring, when is last cart pickup day gonna be, and Going Garbage getting their carts out. And it's, doesn't sound, but there's a lot of bins that need to be picked up, and there's a lot of bins that need to be delivered. So those are some of the things that we're still working on. Besides those, does anybody have any questions about the contractual or them putting a contract together and getting this off the ground?
If not, then could I get a motion?
I make a motion that we accept Going Garbage contract for 5 years, starting at January 1st, 2024.
With the figures that were presented at Finance and Personnel, is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
Motion and a second.
Second.
Okay, and then we do a roll call.
Meverden,
Yes.
Ortlieb,
Yes.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Mehring.
Yes.
Okay, that carries. Okay, administrators report.
A couple things. The final cruise day is here this Friday, 10/6. That will be the Hanseatic. That is not Viking. The Hanseatic will be here, I think 8 a.m. They're supposed to be scheduled to be here. It's a pretty small group of people, I wanna say about 200 or a little less than 200. But that'll be the final cruise for the year, until spring when Viking starts coming back. We don't have anything worked out yet for 2024 with the Hanseatic.
Are they all up to square with what they need to get done as far as their permit and all that stuff?
They are. Everybody is up to date with their permitting, and everybody is paid in full to date.
Okay.
But for the Hanseatic's last trip, that comes Friday.
Yeah.
So that is good news, but a good question. But yes, we are. So 2023, 2024 utilities project on Division Street. I think we're down to the storm work. They're on the last block of the stormwater work. And then probably early next week, we'll be closing down Jefferson Street and rerouting, I think, Sunset to Navarino. Section will be closed when they get out into that radius return, and at that time, they'll do all three of the hookups in that Jefferson Street and Division Street intersection. So if everybody could find an alternative route that normally travels that way every day, I know it's especially going to school in the morning and pickup time, but if everybody would, work with us for that probably week and a half, that'll be closed down. At that time, when that's closed down, Peters will also have a road crew here that will be up on the Fremont on the north end of the project, starting to build the road and get that up to grade. And Summers is scheduled, I think, the third week, which to start performing the concrete work on that project.
On Fremont.
Fremont and Division.
Fremont to
No.
In that intersection, they will start on
the
that end.
Fremont to Division intersection, if you're going to reroute onto Sunset to Navarino, are you gonna put road closed signs on that end of Fremont so that we're not gonna get trucks trying to get down Fremont?
You will still be able to travel down Fremont Street through the closure on the south end of the project. Fremont Street will still be open. Where they're gonna start building the road will be from that intersection just to the south of it a little bit.
Well, we've got that whole intersection is all torn up, though.
They'll probably have a half of a day or a quarter of a day, probably 3-4 hours,
Okay.
where they'll just do some
Grading.
and
Okay.
some work to get that done.
Okay,
So, where all the patches are gonna be more or less till next year when that all gets tore up
okay.
in the 2024 work. So, all right, redevelopment area number 1, Summit Beach condos, that work is underway. Storm sewer, I wasn't down there at all today, but I know last Thursday when they wrapped it up for the weekend, they are across their driveway and started to head up the hill. We had some complications with moving the force main. We found that on Thursday morning. We had to move the force main from the sanitary sewer over. It's right at the same height as our our storm sewer. But we have that moved and they're headed up the hill. I would say by the end of this week, should be up to the top with that and start to kind of massage and grade that all back in down there. That's where that is at. So, public 2024 budget, the workshop was held on 9/19 of 23. The public hearing will be Tuesday, 10/17 at 4 p.m. Finance and personnel meeting, just for the public. If anybody is willing to attend, that's been posted in the paper. But that will be at 4 p.m. on the 17th here, coming up in 2 weeks. So, going garbage, like I mentioned earlier, in the agenda, we're working with that. And the fire service contracts we have sent out, working with the Anapee Lincoln and the town of Pierce to get those finalized, and we should have that ready hopefully by the finance and personnel to put forth to the city council as well, where myself and the fire chief have been working on these, I think, Tom, for about just under a year now. I think we've come to conclusions with the 3 townships now, and I think it's just a matter of them getting them through their boards and execute those contracts and bring that forth here to the city for adoption. That's all I have unless anybody has any questions.
Matt?
Go ahead, Wayne.
A couple months ago, I asked you, and I know you're really busy, I was looking for the figure from the net profit after the sale of the nursing home. We got $1.5 million, and after we took everything out and paid the employees stuff, what do we actually have left that went into the city coffers? I know if you get a chance, or if Amber gets a chance to put that together, I think it'd be kind of interesting to see what we actually ended up with. Other than
Sure.
$1.5 million.
I can put that together.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Matt?
One last thing with Amber's last day, just to make mention, I guess, and get it out to the public. With Amber's last day here, our job is posted for the treasurer's position. It is on the city website, on the city's Facebook page. I think people have been sharing it as far as with the library and the chamber. And if anybody has anybody that's interested, it is out there a couple different places. Or they can just, if any comes across somebody, just give a call here to City Hall. So that's all I have.
Okay. The next thing is mayor's appointments. Tonight, I actually have some appointments I want to make. The cable committee has been missing the citizen appointees, and I did find 3 citizens of Algoma that wanted to come forward and be on that committee. The first one would be Jamie Sulsider, which would take the term that ends in April of '24. Jesse Durst, who would take the position that ended in 4/26. And the third one is Patty Rain, which will take the position from 4/25. So, if there are any questions about that, if not, could I get a motion to approve those 3 people to be on the cable?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Then do you want to do a motion, roll call?
Sure.
Okay.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Ortlieb,
Yes.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Mehring,
Yes.
Meverden.
Yes.
Okay, so that passes, and I will get the phone numbers and information to you on that. Okay, then the other appointment I need to make is, Midge had suggested removing her from the PPP because of other commitments that she had, and John Ortlieb said that he would be willing to take that position, so I would like to nominate John Ortlieb to be on the PPP for the rest of this term.
Oh, he's not.
So moved.
Okay, so could I get somebody to make the motion to do that?
You did.
He did.
Oh, you made a motion, okay, was there a second?
Second.
Okay, then would you do a roll call of approving John on that committee?
Boer,
Yes.
Ortlieb,
Yes. Abstain, I guess. I don't think I can do that.
yes or abstain?
You can,
You can vote for yourself.
stop. I'll abstain.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Mehring,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Meverden,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt.
Yes.
Welcome back to the club.
Okay, so I have nothing else to come before the committee. Any agenda items for the next meeting, get it to either Matt or Aaron so we can get it on the agenda. Our next meeting will be November 6th at 6 p.m. here at City Hall. And then the next item is going into closed session.
Yes.
I will make a formal motion to go into closed session according to Wisconsin statute 1985-1, deliberating, negotiating, purchasing of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session in reference to Algoma Police Department bargaining agreement.
Second.
Okay, you want to do a roll call to go into closed?
Mehring,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Meverden,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Ortlieb,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Dashlet.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, there's nobody here, so. Hard to have-
I can elaborate on that. Have time.
Okay, any action to be taken?
We good?
Are you good, Amber?
Action to be taken out of our closed session. I will make a formal motion regarding Article 13 under wages to accept and approve the memorandum as it's been proposed, with the exception of Article 13 regarding wages, that the sergeant pay be changed and reflect the same as the patrol officers percentage-wise to 2.5, 2.5. Is it 2, 2, and 4?
So the sergeant pay reflect the same percentage as the other officers?
Correct, as the
For the
other
length of the
officers.
contract?
For the length of the contract, yes.
I will second that.
Okay, 1 second here. Okay, so I have a motion by Scott and a second by Midge.
Do a roll call?
Dashlet,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Meering,
Yes.
Ortlieb,
Yes.
Tour,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Meverden.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Okay, the only other thing is a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yeah, we are adjourned.
Hey Lee, you didn't have a chance to talk to